going to say a prayer today. Heavenly Father, protect us through all that should trouble us.
That is me. Why is this here? What is this doing up here?
Pour out a blessing among us, O Lord. Keep us near your heart.
Something is happening here, and I need your help.
When something like this happens to you, like, you don't trust reality anymore. I just remember waking up tied to that chair.
Hi there, Peter and Paul. How are you doing, guys?
Hey, doing great. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Thanks very much for speaking to me, and thanks very much for scaring the bejesus out of me. It's great, great movie. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
It means a lot.
So, I mean, the first obvious question. Well, I don't know. I spoke to your cast just now, and the first question I asked them was, I've got this kind of love-hate relationship with faux documentaries and found footage films, in the fact that they work fantastically well or they fall flat on their face. Luckily, this is the former. It's a great movie. It works so well because it felt so authentic, so real, and really original. So I'm quite curious. I don't want to know what kind of sparked the idea for the film, but I'm quite curious, when you're kind of approaching a film that is such a crowded subgenre, what did you kind of know in the back of your mind that might work with this one to make it kind of stand out in this crowded subgenre, if you will?
It's a good question. It's one of those things that I like found footage. I like fake documentaries because of the sort of challenge that they have for the audience, where it's kind of like what the parameters of the movie are going to be. Sort of what the limitations are, and so it creates an extra sort of fun effect to be like, oh, how are the filmmakers going to subvert those expectations? How are they going to get around it? How are they going to justify characters filming and things like that? And so we were very, very thoughtful in the writing of the film to think about justifications for all of that stuff, justification for every camera, for every source of material, because there's lots of different materials in it. It's not just camera stuff. There's audio recordings, there's web videos, there's Zoom videos, there's mini DV tapes, modern cinema stuff. Putting together that puzzle and thinking about it ahead of time was one of the hardest parts, but also one of the most rewarding, because then we started to have a feel like, oh, we think this will work. We're not going to get on set and be like, well, shit, why would the camera be in this room? Like, yeah. we will have figured all of that out ahead of time.
Yeah, it's creating these logical limitations that hopefully led to creative solutions. And I think, kind of like to your point, Howard, about it being a difficult genre to succeed in, I think the very first conversation we had about this film when we were brainstorming it was the number one thing that bothers us in some found footage movies is the question that enters your mind: why are they still filming? Yeah. And we decided from the beginning, okay, our characters are filmmakers, and it's a story about obsession with filming and what's in the media and that sort of thing. We wanted to bake in the answer to that question from the conceptual stage. Mm-hmm.
And because I know the original idea for the film dates back quite a while. You kind of had this idea for a kind of a podcast or something like that, no? But then I know I think that I think, Paul, you've got a big background in producing documentary films, no? So I imagine
Correct.
Also going into this, there was some kind of inkling of something that you probably worked on in a documentary before that you knew that you could use directly in this film.
Well, so for us, Peter and I are very practical in our filmmaking, and we had been working on a much bigger film, trying to get that off the ground for a while leading up to the pandemic. Pandemic hits, we spent that time turning that into a novel, which released in 22, I believe, The Dead Friends Society. Yeah. And so it was beginning of 21, and we were talking about the struggles with trying to get that project off the ground, and decided, okay, we need to come up with something that if everyone else says no to, we can still figure out a way to do it ourselves. We can scrap it together. And, we asked, what are our strengths and what's our advantage? And so we're like, well, I produce sports documentaries. I know how to do that. Got a documentary editor, got documentary cinematographer, that are all good friends. And the format also allows you to operate at a lower budget, because if everything looks perfectly lit, perfect cinematography and stuff like that, it breaks the realism. And so that was kind of the starting point of the conversation. And then Peter brought up like, oh, well, what about the podcast idea? What if that just became a movie? And so it kind of just started with, we like building a box to work within and go, okay, what can we do within this box?
Yeah. Something about the film kind of really draws a lot of inspiration also from true crime documentaries as well. Was there anything specifically, were there any specific kind of touchstones that you kind of helped inspire you to the way they wanted to tell the story, specifically the kind of the horror side of this story?
Not a true crime doc, but there is one doc that was probably a surprising inspiration. Peter, why don't you take that?
Well, the documentary that influenced us the most was Sarah Polley's Stories We Tell, which is a documentary that the actress filmmaker Sarah Polley made about her family investigating this story that had sort of like filtered down from generations relating to her sort of childhood and parentage, and it's sort of it excavates how does a secret sort of spread around inside of a family and who's the source of truth and stuff like that. And so we are huge fans of that film, and that influenced it heavily on a story side, on a thematic side, on a purely functional like how are docs made side. For the true crime stuff, we actually kind of made a list of do not do's from true crime docs, because if you watch a lot of Netflix true crime things or something, there's a bit of a structure to them that has a talking head who shows up, who lays out something, and then is like, oh, and then when like the bad version of it for us would have been like, and then when we got to the church, like it blew, what happened next blew our minds. And like, and they're sort of setting up constantly what you can expect from the next 5 to 10 minutes of whatever they're going to show you. I feel like that's a very true crimey thing to do. And so we made a very intentional choice to not do that. And I remember another true crimey thing that I think is more of a pet peeve of mine. I don't know that Paul would have cared, and our DP David Kuhn definitely did not care. But I was like, I don't want any drone shots in this movie. I don't want just a drone floating over this small Texas town. Like that feels very true crimey to me. So I remember laying that down. And there was one day on set when we were getting a bunch of B-roll of the small town, and David Kuhn, our cinematographer, he kept looking at me. He was like, "I got the drone. It's in the back of the car." And I was like, "No, I don't want it. Keep it."
I think a true kind of a to me a true crime doc is something that kind of holds your hand and takes you along on a ride. And we wanted to make something where we're kind of just like, keep up. Like we're moving.
You got to kind of fill in the mid blanks while you're going along now. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't fall behind, or, don't run to the bathroom. You're going to miss this. We just wanted to kind of, start the freight train and just, there's no room to breathe, sort of a thing.
And we're talking about the freight train. We've got to talk about the passengers, the cast as well. How did you kind of help the cast to make the kind of to keep that kind of energy that you wanted, that didn't fall into the pitfalls that you said the kind of true crime documentaries do fall into, to make it kind of, to not be feeding audiences exactly what's going to happen in the next 5-10 minutes?
I think one of the things we talked a lot with the actors about how do they think they would play out a scene. We planned for, I think, more improv than would be in the film. There is improv stuff in it. John Galson, who plays Endicott, the opening of the movie when he's doing the sort of televangelist prayer
he was shocked and surprised and grateful that you put him in right at the beginning of the film. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was an improv moment. We were about to move on from that setup, and he was like, "Hey, can I try something?" And so I think we had talked with each of them separately and then together as a group about their characters and their relationships with one another, and how do you think these two feel about like one another prior to the events of the film, after the events of the film, because it does play with multiple time periods. And so we gave them the space to think about all of that stuff. So then on the day, it could also influence how they were moving around the spaces that we were in, because since we're not a traditional film and we had to basically build or utilize sets in a 360-degree way where the camera could see anything at any time. One of the most influential things that the cast did was us learning how they would use the space. And we might have thought like, okay, the most interesting angle on this horror moment might be from over here. But if Kelsey, who's playing Lynn and is also supposed to be the one filming in that moment, if she can't find a motivation or reason for her to go and hit that mark for the camera, then we're not going to force it to happen. We're going to talk to her and be like, okay, where do you think you would end up in this conversation? And then we're going to work backwards from there. So there was a lot of back and forth with them, and we wanted to make sure that anyone who was on board with the project was on board with that process where we were going to be very collaborative and very find it on the day kind of thing.
I imagine then the DOP was almost like an extra cast member because of kind of what you just said, no?
I mean, absolutely. So David Kuhn, our cinematographer, director of photography, what you're seeing in the film is kind of a mix of sometimes it's what Kelsey had in her hands, and then sometimes it's him. But we would do the takes where Kelsey would go first. We would kind of get the wide, the security cams, all that figured out. David Kuhn is staring at the monitor, just memorizing her movements. And then we would have him come in because we got to make sure like we've got the good clean version, focus hits and all that kind of stuff. And then he would go through the steps, like kind of mimicking her movements and that sort of thing. And so it was complicated to do. And even then, one of the funny things, this is how good of a cinematographer David Kuhn is we had to keep telling him, no, you got to make it worse. You got to get shakier. You got to like misfocus and things like that. And then once he started to misfocus a little bit, make a little shakier, that's when the magic started to happen and it started to feel real. So it was a weird situation where we had to tell our cinematographer to do a worse job intentionally.
Brilliant. And also, the film depicts kind of small town religious life as kind of being very protected, but at the same time very manipulative. It out. Was that something that you always wanted to kind of address with the film, or was that something that kind of was weaved into the story kind of later on? You were like, hey, this is the way we can kind of bring this horror into this small town.
It was a bit of both. I think the religious aspect kind of went hand in hand because the story, the broad strokes of it are about someone who is manipulating a small town, and the people and the residents have no idea what it is. And so then you sort of ask yourself, okay, in a small town, who would be in that position? Who could fly under the radar?
Yeah.
And who could have access to a large swath of the town? And the local preacher is a sort of default answer. So then once you sort of figure out who the players are, so to speak, then you start to, Paul and I would ask each other, okay, so thematically, how does that fit in? Like, how do we then work that into the writing of it? So it never started as oh, we're going to make a film about small town religion. It was more of okay, now that we know small town religion is a character in the film, essentially, how do we work that in even more? How do we relate that into the history of each character?
I'm quite curious.
Kind of going off.
Sorry.
Going off that with what Peter was saying about theme, I think, right, one of the big themes of the film is, inability to believe something, or even when presented with video evidence, right? It's just you are set in your beliefs. And I think, and this isn't a judgment of it, but I think religion is the ultimate believing without seeing. Right. It's, those who practice believe in God or whatever, without seeing that entity. They just blindly believe it. And so it felt like thematically it all just kind of fit together. On top of the fact, like I think Peter was saying, it's just, we live in Austin, Texas. You drive like 15 minutes in any direction. You're in the middle of nowhere, small town, Texas. And you've got Main Street, you got a police station, and you got a church. Yeah. In all of them. And so it's just kind of like, okay, if we're in a small town Texas, where is the power? What are people doing? Where are they all congregating and see each other? And it kind of just felt like it all fit together naturally.
Mm-hmm. But obviously at the same time, having this central figure who's kind of this religious, this clergyman, I guess because like you said, you wanted to kind of keep clear of any pitfalls from like documentaries, true crime, those kind of things. I imagine you wanted to kind of steer clear of typical cliche men of the cloth as well, which you did brilliantly here. I'm quite curious, what was kind of the idea that you wanted to go for here to make sure that it was familiar and it was kind of authentic, but at the same time, it was something we hadn't seen in a film before.
That's a good question, and I think that was one of the biggest benefits of casting was when we wrote the character of Reverend Endicott. I do think that he was, to our discredit, much more of a cliche on the page.
Right.
He was written as this older, taller, lankier figure that immediately is sort of up to no good because he's kind of the normal horror movie preacher guy.
Yeah.
And we were fine with that. Like, we're not trying to hide that this guy is an important part of this mystery. Like, you immediately, when he shows up, you suspect, okay, this guy's involved somehow. But once we cast John Golson, who is a brilliant actor and is not what we had initially written, which was a tall, lanky, elderly man. He is sort of the opposite of that. He has a youthful presence to him, even though he's our age. He has a sort of approachability, but a sternness, and we really let him lean into that and let him guide us. He sent us some videos of televangelist preachers from the Houston area that he had grown up with as an example to be like, hey, yeah, look, this short guy who doesn't look like someone you would normally see on TV, like, this is what I want to lean into. And so we really worked with him and let him sort of run loose on some aspects of that.
I was speaking to him and he said that he was surprised. He was very thankful, but he didn't expect to kind of open and set the scene. What was it specifically about that scene that made you decide that that's how you wanted to start the film? And kind of, does that mean that you didn't shoot kind of chronologically, or was that just kind of one specific scene that you thought we need to bring that at the beginning, just kind of?
Well, we definitely didn't shoot. Yeah, we definitely didn't shoot chronologically. We shot just based on indie film production realities, but it was one of those things. We were shooting what was called the Salvation Hour, his public access show material that day, and like we had basically shot what we'd written, and John just said, "Can I try something?" We're like, "Yes, of course." Like, that was the thing we learned on this movie. If the actors want to try something, we try it. And he tried that, and what's in the film, the opening, I think that was the only take, and it was unbroken, and we saw that in the moment, and we all got goosebumps, and because it felt so thematically relevant to everything, and it kind of painted a picture, and he's like casting a spell over you almost from the beginning, and it was the first thing we put on the timeline in editing. We were like, let's just try starting with that, and we'll see how. And so much else changed in post-production. A lot changed, but never that. That was always the opening of the movie, which wasn't intended to. But John worked magic.
It's interesting. It sets a vibe right away. It sets a tone, a mystery. You're like, what is this? What's the context? Who is this guy? Which is also kind of a very true crimey thing to do, where you start with a piece of footage that you're not going to contextualize until later in the film. Like, you start with something that's going to fit that vibe. And so, we, as Paul said, it kind of was always that tone setter right away. And it became a touchstone sort of for the film, even though we hadn't planned it that way. And we had written another opening that was sort of that vibe setter, that tone setter, and we just scrapped it. We're like, we're not even going to use that. Like, we're just going to use this.
So just before I let you go, there's one thing that I cannot mention. This was really bold of you. Kind of when it comes to found footage, we don't usually get to see a lot of effects because it can pull you out of the authenticity of the film. So I'm quite curious. Was that always a decision to be so in your face with those icky effects that we get to see later on without kind of spoiling anything? Or was that something that came later on? And I imagine that kind of also put a lot of pressure on you, because if you made a mess of one take, you had to start fresh because it's all on camera prosthetic. No, I assume.
Yeah, it's mostly, yeah, it's a lot of practical. And I think, for us, it's we recognize that whether we're asking, an audience to watch our movie or James Cameron's Avatar, they take up the same digital shelf space on Apple TV or whatever, right? Or at Amazon. And so we wanted to make sure we delivered something like our own version. It's not going to be the roller coaster with all the spins and upside downs that Avatar is going to give you, but we wanted to give you a really cool, maybe a dark ride, right? If I'm sticking with the metaphor or analogy, but we wanted to make sure we really delivered on something. So I think every part of the effects process was terrifying for me and Peter, because we were just like, oh man, I hope. But we worked with such incredible people. Meredith Johns here in Austin, Texas, led the effects team, and her work is incredible. And it gets so much of what you see on screen is practical. Aaron Moorhead, our producer, did our visual effects, and most of it was just cleanup and augmentation. And I'm so proud of the work Meredith and her team did. But and even like there's a sequence in the third act where, a character goes into this impossible space. And that was something else that stemmed from Peter and I going, we need the audience to kind of get a glimpse into the eye of madness. And, it was always about audience satisfaction and enjoying the ride. And that entire sequence is digital, and that was a big gamble, but we found the right creative partner on that.
And to your question, it's one of the things that found footage movies normally do is they sort of skirt around the like, oh, we're not going to show you this, like you're going to get a glimpse of it, but then we're not going to give you the whole full Monty of it. And so we decided on the page, like, no, we're going to do the full Monty. Like, once it happens, hopefully, our gamble was, hopefully it's a pleasant surprise, because we've sort of coached the audience to think, oh, the movie's only going to do so much. And then it goes beyond what you think it's going to do. And it becomes it opens up a whole other can of worms, which is a lot of fun.
Never better said, yeah.
Yeah. So it was very intentional for it to feel like it was only going to get so big and then get bigger.
No, it works fantastic. Like I said, congratulations on the movie. Thanks very much for speaking to me. I wish you the best of luck with the release when it comes out in December. And I hope to speak to you again sometime soon about another movie.
Thanks.
So, thank you, Howard.
Likewise.
It was great
All
to
right,
talk
thanks
to
very
you.
much for your time, guys. Nice to speak to you.
Bye.
Cheers now. Bye.
Bye.
Did you feel it? That's the blessing.